We're satisfied that we have our query set correctly. We can then execute the query, and once we do that, we see that we've triggered the error again, and we find another value, which is users. To continue our enumeration, we will insert users to the not in list of our query to further filter our search. Once we add it in after logs, and we hit enter, and we see we've now found the table called products. We will keep appending into the tables to the not in selection of our query until we see a final error that's the 80020009. We see the error in line 171, which tells us that we have found all of the available tables and our query iteration is finished. Now we want to make for sure that we maintain all of the information that we've gained thus far, so we can switch over to our FreeMind application and record our findings. We will create an anchor node of e-commerce, since that's the database we're working within, and then we can create child nodes of products, logs, and users as the tables we have discovered. Now that we've got our FreeMind map started and all of our child nodes recorded, we can switch back to the web application, and our next goal is to enumerate the users table. This means gathering all of the columns within the users table itself. We need to have the columns because we are looking for the data, the actual data containing the users table, because we know that usually this kind of table contains the user IDs and passwords which are used on the application. We first have to determine which columns are present, though. To do this, we will use the same technique we used to get the table names. So up in our query, we leave the 999 with the closed parentheses after it. We're still going to use an or one in, and we will always select the first record within the select top one, and then we'll do the cast query. We want to use the e-commerce syscolumns name, which will give us the records in the syscolumn table, which is a system table within the e-commerce database. That houses all of the column names within the e-commerce database. And again, we're going to use cast as a string using the varchar 4096 limit, so that payload will trigger a conversion error. So we continue to expand our query. So now we do our from the e-commerce syscolumns, because we're working from the syscolumns database. As you can see, this is a very complex SQL injection payload. The join will make sure that we only gather the columns within our user table. So we join by the IDs. We make sure the syscolumns ID is equal to the sysobjects ID. You can find the meaning of system tables within SQL Server MSDN documentation online. Just keep in mind they may vary according to the version of SQL Server. So this payload is valid for the version of SQL Server which is the Express version in our case. The Express version is also common to find online. So now we want to filter the name, so we will use the user table. So we will further add a condition to our query to accomplish that. Once we have our query fully entered, we want to finish it with the comment or the double hyphen, and upon hitting enter we see we've found the first column of the users table, which is ID. Now that we have this data, we can switch back to our free mind map and add a new child node to the users node and make it the first column of the table, which is ID. Returning back to our web application, we start our enumeration iterative job where we will append our query with the and name not end filter, because we want the next query to not include the ID, just as we did previously. Note that we received an error here once we entered this in, because we did not specify the name we were talking about. So there is an ambiguous column name in the query. So we will go within our query and copy and paste the e-commerce syscolumn's name as our column name in our AND statement. The error occurred because there are two columns called name which belong to two different tables. So we will specify the database and table to which the name belongs to. Once we paste the column name, we hit enter and see that we found the next column name, which is username. We want to be sure to update our free mind chart with this information as another child node of the users node. So we quickly add that child node in. Then we can go back to our web app and append our query with the value we just received to continue to filter out the columns. Once entered, we hit enter and find the next column name. And we see that that is password. Password is the next column name. So now we can take that and add it to our free mind chart. Then we'll return to our web app and again append this to our filter in our query. Once we have it, we hit enter and we see the next column, which is priv, P-R-I-V. So we'll copy that and put it in our free mind chart. Then we go back and add it to our filter. Once we add priv to our filter and hit enter, we see our error, which indicates that we've reached the end of the available columns in this table. So now we know we have 4 columns in the user table. So this far we have the tables and the columns. So now we can move forward to enumerate the actual data. So now back at our application, we will once again use a cast query that will retrieve the username from the users table. We want to do this where the ID is greater than 0, since we can assume that the ID is the primary key of this table. So we can type that into our query. Since the value we want is greater than 0, we should get the first record of the table. We finish our query by closing the parentheses and putting our comment characters. So we can close it, add our comments, and then we hit enter. We see that admin is returned within our query. So admin is the content within the first record of the users table within the username column. So now we can take this information and add it to our free mind chart by adding a child node to the username node. And we make that admin. So using the same pattern, we can now begin moving forward with our enumeration by using ID as the primary key and increasing the value, or by using the not end technique we used earlier. Here we will just increase the ID value from a greater than 0 to an equal 1. So we can change our